Krakow, Poland, 1944. A train is being loaded with Jewish men, women, and children. They are being sent to Auschwitz. Everyone on that platform knows what Auschwitz means. A German man in an expensive suit pushes through the crowd. He is shouting at SS officers, waving papers, pointing at people on the train and pulling them off one by one. He is not a resistance fighter. He is not hiding his identity. He is wearing a Nazi party pin on his lapel. He is one of them, and he is using everything that makes him one of them. His connections, his money, his charm, his party membership to pull as many people off that train as he possibly can. His name is Oskar Schindler, and by the end of World War II, he will have saved over 1,200 Jewish lives using the very system that was designed to destroy them. This is not the story of a hero. This is the story of a deeply flawed man who found his conscience too late, and then spent everything he had to act on it. To understand how a Nazi party member saved 1,200 Jewish lives, you first have to understand who Oskar Schindler was before his conscience caught up with him. Oskar Schindler was born on April 28, 1908 in Zwickau, a town in what is now the Czech Republic. He grew up in a Catholic family, but faith played little role in his early life. What did play a role was ambition and pleasure, and a talent for charm that opened doors money alone could not. He was a womanizer, a drinker, a man who loved the good life and was willing to cut corners to get it. In 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, Schindler saw not a tragedy but an opportunity. He followed the German army into Krakow. He joined the Nazi Party. He used bribes and connections to acquire a confiscated Jewish-owned factory. He used Jewish forced labor because it was cheaper than paying workers. Oskar Schindler in 1939 was exactly what he appeared to be, a war profiteer using the suffering of others to make himself rich. What happened to change him is one of the most remarkable transformations in the history of World War II. The moment that changed Oskar Schindler happened on a hill above Krakow in 1943. He was on horseback watching the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto below. The SS were clearing the ghetto. Jewish residents who had been forced to live there for years were being rounded up. Those deemed capable of work were being sent to labor camps. Those deemed incapable were being shot in the streets. Schindler watched from above. And in that moment, something broke open in him that had never broken open before. He later described what he saw: the chaos, the screaming, the bodies in the streets. And then, something that stayed with him every day for the rest of his life. A small girl in a red coat, walking alone through the chaos. Completely calm, as if she was somewhere else entirely. He watched her until she disappeared from sight. That red coat, that small figure, that impossible calm in the middle of an atrocity. Something shifted in Oskar Schindler that day that never shifted back. He rode down from that hill a different man than he had ridden up. After the ghetto liquidation, Schindler began doing something that made no business sense whatsoever. He started protecting his workers. Not because it was profitable, not because it helped the war effort, but because he had looked down from that hill and seen what happened to Jewish people when nobody protected them. He started claiming workers were essential to his factory production even when they were not. He put elderly workers and children on his essential worker list, knowing they could not perform the tasks he claimed they were performing. He bribed SS officers. He cultivated relationships with Gestapo officials. He threw parties. He used his charm and his connections and his money to keep his workers inside his factory and away from the camps. He was spending his war profits not on himself but on bribes to save lives. His accountant, Oskar Stern, a Jewish man who had helped Schindler run the factory from the beginning, became his closest collaborator in this operation. Together they began building something that neither of them could have fully articulated at the start: a list. By 1944, the situation for Jewish people in German-occupied Poland had reached its most desperate point. The death camps were operating at full capacity. The liquidation of the remaining labor camps was beginning. Jews who had survived this long were now being sent directly to Auschwitz. Schindler knew what was coming. He had spent 4 years building relationships with the most dangerous people in the Nazi apparatus. He had spent his entire factory fortune on bribes and favors and parties. Now he was going to spend what was left on something that would define everything. He was going to buy people. Working with Stern, he compiled a list of his factory workers. 1,200 names, each one accompanied by a job title and a skill description that argued they were essential war industry workers who could not be spared. Most of the descriptions were fabricated. A rabbi was listed as a metal worker. Children too young to operate machinery were listed as experienced factory hands. Elderly men and women were listed as skilled laborers. Schindler submitted the list to the SS and paid for each person on it. He spent every Reichsmark he had. 1,200 names, 1,200 lives. Not everything went according to plan. When the women and children from Schindler's List were being transported to his new factory in Brunlitz, their train was diverted to Auschwitz. 300 women and children who should have been going to the relative safety of Schindler's factory ended up at the most notorious death camp in history. When Schindler found out, he did something that required a level of nerve that defies description. He went to Auschwitz. He walked into the camp. He argued with the commandant. He bribed SS officers on the spot. He insisted that these women and children were his essential workers and demanded their return. The Auschwitz commandant eventually agreed. 300 women and children walked out of Auschwitz alive. It is believed to be one of the only times in the history of the Holocaust that a group of Jewish people entered Auschwitz and came out alive, because one man walked in after them and refused to leave without them. By early 1945, Germany's defeat was inevitable. Soviet forces were advancing from the east, Allied forces from the west. The Third Reich was collapsing. For Schindler's workers, the end of the war meant survival, liberation, the chance to rebuild lives that the Holocaust had tried to destroy. For Schindler, it meant something very different. He was a Nazi Party member, a German industrialist who had profited from the occupation of Poland. When the war ended, he would be a wanted man, not celebrated, hunted. On the night of May 8, 1945, the night Germany surrendered, Schindler gathered his workers in the factory. He told them he was leaving. He had to run. He would be arrested if he stayed. What happened next in that factory on that night is one of the most moving moments of the entire war. His workers, the people he had bought and saved and protected, gave him a letter signed by every one of them testifying to what he had done, to be shown to any Allied soldiers who stopped him, and they gave him something else. A ring, made from the gold fillings of one of his workers, engraved inside with a line from the Talmud. Whoever saves one life saves the world entire. After the war, Oskar Schindler's life fell apart. The skills that had made him so effective during the war, the charm, the connections, the ability to work any room, did not translate to peacetime success. He tried farming in Argentina. It failed. He tried business in Germany. It failed. He was broke. He was drinking heavily. His marriage had collapsed. The man who had saved 1,200 lives could not seem to save his own career. The bitter irony was complete. He had spent his entire factory fortune saving his workers. He had nothing left. But the people he had saved had not forgotten him. The Schindler Juden, the Schindler Jews as they called themselves, took care of him. They sent him money. They invited him to Israel. They welcomed him as family. A German, a former Nazi Party member, welcomed in Israel as a hero. He was recognized by Yad Vashem, Israel's official Holocaust memorial, as righteous among the nations, one of the highest honors Israel can bestow on a non-Jewish person. He traveled between Germany and Israel for the rest of his life, welcomed in both, truly at home in neither. At Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, there is an avenue called the Avenue of the Righteous Among the Nations. Lining that avenue are trees, each one planted in honor of a non-Jewish person who risked their life to save Jewish people during the Holocaust. One of those trees was planted for Oskar Schindler, a German, a former Nazi Party member, a man who came to Poland to profit from the suffering of others. His tree stands in Jerusalem. And today, the descendants of the people he saved number in the tens of thousands. 1,200 people saved in World War II. Tens of thousands of descendants alive today because those 1,200 survived. Schindler died on October 9, 1974 in Germany. He was 66 years old. He had requested to be buried in Jerusalem. He is the only former Nazi Party member buried in Israel. His grave in Jerusalem is never without flowers, left by the descendants of the people he saved, and by strangers who simply know the story. Here is the power play and twisted truth at the heart of this story. The Nazi system was built on the belief that Jewish lives had no value, that they could be taken without consequence, that the machinery of the state could process human beings like industrial material. Oskar Schindler used that same machinery against itself. He used the Nazi Party membership that gave him access. He used the corruption that ran through the SS like rot through old wood. He used the greed and the vanity and the love of good food and drink that made SS officers human despite everything they did. He found the cracks in the system and he drove 1,200 lives through them. The twisted truth is this. The man who saved more Jewish lives than almost any other individual in World War II was a member of the party that was trying to kill them. He did not start as a hero. He became one bribe at a time. One name on a list at a time. One life at a time. Until he had spent everything he had and saved everyone he could. Oskar Schindler was not a good man when World War II began. He was an opportunist, a profiteer, a member of the party that committed the greatest atrocity in modern history. But something happened to him in the middle of that atrocity that changed him completely. He saw a small girl in a red coat, and he could not look away. History's Wildside is about power plays and twisted truths. And here is the final twisted truth of Oskar Schindler's story. The system he belonged to was designed to be unstoppable, a machine so large and so terrible that individual resistance seemed meaningless. Schindler proved that one person willing to use every tool available, charm, bribery, connections, money, nerve, could find the cracks in even the most monstrous system. He did not stop the Holocaust, but he pulled 1,200 people out of it, one name at a time. And today their descendants number in the tens of thousands. All of them alive because one deeply flawed man looked down from a hill in 1943 and finally saw what was happening below him and decided he was going to do something about it. Subscribe to History's Wildside for a new story every Sunday. Power plays, twisted truths, and the moments that changed everything. This has been History's Wildside. I will see you next Sunday.